Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Ivan Walks, and like to welcome you to this edition of Black Health Trust. Um, I know that our founder, Dr. Maxey, was just with us, and I'm assuming that there are some technical challenges that have just popped up, and he will be back with us shortly. Um, Also like to thank Dr. Hines and Dr. Nabrit Stevens, neither one of whom is with us today, for being so supportive with our Black Health Trust. And since I get a chance to start today, I wanted to follow up on the conversation that Dr. Maxey and I were having just before um, we actually did the opening for today's program. Um, the Dr. Maxey talked about a patient with a condition that Dr. Maxey advised for the patient to be taken to the emergency room. And in the chat, there was a comment about why folks may not want to go to the emergency room. And I think it's important for us practitioner, provider, doctor people to understand that everything isn't about what's going on medically and what the best medical intervention is. The comment from Linda Hall in the chat is that patients with Medicare Advantage sometimes don't want to go to the emergency department because of the cost. That's unfortunate, but a real reason for making that decision. And then Linda Hall went on to say that's why she has original Medicare. And there are a couple of really important things tied up in that very timely comment. One of the things tied up in that comment is that depending on how you make decisions about your insurance coverage, you may be more or less likely to have a big financial hit when you need to go to the emergency room or when something unexpected comes up and may not have coverage, or at least the amount of coverage that makes it not a really big deal. Um, we know, most of us know, I think, that one of the primary reasons for folks to have big financial problems um, in life is the expense of healthcare, whether it's the cost of getting treatment, whether it's the cost of medication after you've been treated and prescribed something, or just the cost of going in to find out what's going on. I don't feel good. I don't feel well. This is happening. So, so that is absolutely one of the issues. The other thing, and then we will go ahead and start with the rebroadcast that we're going to do today. The other issue is when you're making a decision about keeping your original Medicare, going to Medicare Advantage, those kinds of things, it's good to have some advice that is exactly consistent with your situation so that you know what's best for you. So those are very important comments from Linda Hall. I really appreciate those. And I appreciate Dr. Maxey giving us a real time understanding of what it's like sometimes for both the provider, the practitioner, the doctor, as well as the person who has a healthcare problem and may be hesitant to go to the emergency room because of any of those reasons we've just discussed. So Dr. Maxey is back with us. The wonder and joy of technology. You can disappear in a second and be back in a minute. You're on mute, sir. We need to get you unmuted, Dr. Maxey. There we
Can you hear
go.
me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was saying the internet at my location just went out. I don't know what happened. Maybe it had poltergeist in here. But I want to go ahead with the topic, which has sickness that's often caused by uh, ignorance. And by ignorance, I mean not knowing things that we don't know, that we don't have enough knowledge about. I'm not using it in a derogatory sense, but in the sense that you don't know what you don't know. So even though this broadcast is from previous, we know that we still have the problem of not only COVID, but we have the flu, we have other infectious diseases, we have HIV, and there are a lot of precautions that we still need to take. It is not all hunky-dory. And I wanted to have at least a few minutes of this rebroadcast so we can comment on it. And we know that we, especially those of you who may be seniors, need to keep updated on your COVID vaccine, your RSV vaccines, the flu vaccine, the pneumovax vaccine. So I thought it was entirely appropriate that we do this and discuss it briefly. So go, Simon, if you can roll that, I'd appreciate it.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Health Trust, a program brought to you with the urgent need and hope that we are providing you with credible information to help you make appropriate life decisions in this time of trial and danger. Our program
If we can
today
turn up
is
the audio,
entitled How to
Simon,
Stay Safe
it's hard to
from
hear.
Sickness and Death. And we're going to have our roundtable discussion of our moderators. And without further ado, I turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barbara Neighbor-Stevens. Thank you, Dr. Ivan Walks and Dr. Jocelyn Hines for being our co-moderators. I'm going to ask Pastor Pointer to join our panel today, Dr. Gibson and Dr. Despani, as we discuss our topic. There's a little bit more to that topic than was read. Our topic is keeping our community safe despite the raging ignorance that people are showing by disregarding the danger of the virus, of the pandemic, and of these variables and variants that are coming. And we have suffered mightily in our community, and that is my main concern. The rest can have natural selection. But we have tried to meet people where they are, treat them with kind understanding. But for one, I had a birthday in early December, and I turned 80 years old. And my family wants me around for a while. And therefore, they don't want me around people who don't care for my life, such as being in my face, being unvaccinated, not believing that fat meat is greasy. So in my office, where I practice not only nephrology, but primary care, in order to come to my office, starting Monday, you must be vaccinated. You must wear a mask. We must spray your hands with an alcohol or hand sanitizer solution, and you must practice safe distancing. All others I can treat with telemedicine. As a physician who's practiced almost 50 years, I don't owe my life to people who are expressing ignorance. And I'm sorry if I offend some, but that's the way it is. But I would like to start out our meeting, given that I was taught when you're up against giants, such as David was in the Old Testament, such as Daniel was in the lion's den, such as the 3 young boys were in the jail, Meshach and Abednego. I'm going to ask our resident pastor to start off with a celebration of prayer to bless our communities, increase our understanding, and then let's go with our program. Pastor Pointer.
Thank you, Dr. Maxie. Let us pray. Holy God, Jacob's God, we bow humbly before you. We say again, oh God, thank you. Your great kindness and mercy toward us has brought us to this moment. Let us see it pregnant with possibility. Let us use every bit of our being to magnify you and to glorify you. Let us walk together as brothers and sisters and not be weary. Let us understand that our role is to lift you and to glorify your name. And in so doing, let us find the least among us and provide them with succor, comfort, and with the love that Christ has given unto us. So then let us open the eyes of this community and let's require that we would not only be intelligent, but responsible. So show us, oh God, what are those things that are good and perfect in your sight? And we'll be careful to give your name the glory, the honor, and the praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Pointer. Uh, Dr. Neighbor Stevens, I think in light of the transmission of both Delta, which is our main concern, and Omicron, which is our coming concern, it would be wonderful if you would share with us the statistics that you have put together in the data as we move on.
I will be happy to. I would like to ask your indulgence that in the context of data, I'd like to share a personal story while Simon is bringing the slides up. This week I saw a graph. I couldn't find it to copy it to share today, but I saw a graph that indicated over the last several months the incidence of COVID in nursing home facilities. And it caught my attention because the same story seems to be repeating itself that we started this whole pandemic off with, which is with it starting, well, not starting, but the surge evidencing itself first in the nursing home population. And again, we are beginning to see a significant increase in the slope of the number of nursing home residents that are becoming infected and dying. And this resonated with me because at the beginning of this month, I lost my last remaining sibling who was a patient in a nursing home in California. He was fully vaccinated and had actually had a booster, but it is thought, I don't know that they've proven it yet, but it was thought that one of the aides brought in COVID into the facility. He was one of the first two to come down with COVID. And by the time he was transferred to the hospital, there were 10 patients in that facility that came down with COVID. And I don't know what happened after that because he never made it back to that facility. It was this COVID infection in his weakened condition that ultimately led to his death at the beginning of this month. So I'm sharing this story because we think about ourselves, I hope, sometimes in terms of our own health, but we may not be as mindful as we need to be as to what we may be doing to others. And I hope that this story helps to make concrete this abstract thought. So without further ado, let me review our statistics. As always, we extracted this information from the CDC website, current as of last night. Since the beginning of all of this, we have had reported 50,636,126 cases of COVID. Of those cases, approximately 11.6% are attributed to African Americans. The total new daily cases is 156,755, which has jumped over the last 2 weeks and is part of the reason of the concern about a difficult winter ahead of us dealing with Omicron. However, this surge right now, 99% of it is still due to Delta and unvaccinated people. Total US deaths are reported to be at 802,969. We're knocking on the door of 803,000, a very sad statistic. 13.6% are attributable to African Americans. And today's Sunday, Friday's total daily deaths was 1,816. Next slide, please. I thought I would change up a little bit the way we are reporting the vaccinations, because I think things are in flux a bit as far as how we're going to track the vaccine data going forward. But as of yesterday, the total number of US citizens who are fully vaccinated using the definition of having received 2 doses of a 2-dose vaccine or 1 dose of a 1-dose vaccine is 203.7 million, or 61.4% of the US population. Of that, 10.1% of the African American population has been fully vaccinated. Now, I want to pause here in reflection on the opening remarks of Dr. Maxey. If we are going to be concerned about our community, we must be concerned about this very low vaccination rate, because it is clear that those who are not vaccinated are the most vulnerable. Of those who are fully vaccinated, total boosters that have been given so far are 59.2 million, which represents 29.1% of the people who have been 29.1% of the US population that's eligible for boosters. The line above is my error. I forgot to take it off. That was from 2 weeks ago. So you can see we have not made much progress in the past 2 weeks in terms of those who are fully vaccinated in this country. So that's the end of my data for today.
Dr. Neighbor-Stevens, can I just ask you to clarify, when we look at this last slide, the total US fully vaccinated, the 203 million.
That was from yesterday.
That was from yesterday. That 10.1%, is that 10.1% of the African American population, or is that 10.1% of the folks who are fully vaccinated?
That is 10.1% of the folks who are fully vaccinated.
Okay, so we are
an even smaller number, since we represent 12.4, 12.6, depending on who you're looking at, of the total US population.
Great. So bottom line is African Americans are under vaccinated based on our percentage of the US population.
Correct.
Okay.
And I will try to make that point even clearer next week.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, Simon. I picked out a few slides that I just wanted to put out for discussion. Go to the next slide. And what we know so far about Omicron. So the slide is sort of self-explanatory, but we do know that this Omicron variant is much more transmissible. And it's said to double its number in 2 to 3 days. Is Dr. Despani on?
Yep.
I have 3 slides and I'd like you to just say what you say, but if you just talk about these slides for a moment in the beginning, if you would.
Just a quick summary is that basically what's going on is this is a immunoevasive variant, meaning that it's capable of causing breakthrough infections in those who are already vaccinated. And the reality is that if you've only had 2 vaccinations, your protection against it drops to 19%. Now, that 19% is inclusive of being protected against severe disease, but this vaccine is not magic, right? We don't engage in magical thinking here, right? So the reality is that whenever you get a vaccine, more often than not, you're not granted lifelong immunity. Instead, whenever you're dealing with an RNA virus that can mutate and shift, what happens is that you have a period of heightened immunity, within your T cells as well as your B cells, and then that wanes, right? And then the whole thing is that getting a booster is what allows you to boost up, the whole point why somebody would build a fire alarm in a building, right? If there were no fire alarms, then like everybody would burn to death. Is the exact same thing which goes on with your immune system, right? So the reality is that if you have a second booster, the most important thing right now, if you have a second shot, the most important thing now is to get a booster. And if you haven't been vaccinated, it is utterly critical for you to get your first shot and begin the series. The reason why is because the data that's coming out indicates that this variant is no milder than Delta or anything. So if you're not vaccinated, you're probably going to end up in the hospital and you could very well die. So I mean, there's a saying in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, and Hosea is one of the Nevi'im, which once you translate from Hebrew, that's one of the prophets, and he says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge, and because you have rejected knowledge, I will reject you." And then that's basically what's going on during this pandemic, right? People rely on charlatans and whatnot who don't have their best interests in mind, and then when you die, like that's it, like you have destroyed entire worlds, right? Because there's a Jewish concept that saving a life is as if you saved an entire universe, and if you destroy a life, whether directly or indirectly, is as if you destroyed an entire world. So protect yourself, and the way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated, to socially distance, and also to wear masks. And then probably by January, we will have more word from the FDA on whether they have approved Molnupiravir as well as Paxlovid, which are the 2 anti-COVID antiviral drugs.
Let's go to the next slide. I do want you to feel free to speak as you would, but I thought these 3 slides were important. So this slide basically says that this was first detected in Botswana in November, and then 3 days later was detected in South Africa and then in Hong Kong with a traveler returning home from South Africa. And they labeled it as a variant of concern. We do believe that this variant is potentially going to take over the dominance of Delta in the United States, but currently Delta is the main concern because it is killing people and kicking butts and taking names as we speak. Next slide. So it's been detected in over 80 countries, including the US. It's now spreading rapidly in many countries in Europe, including Denmark, Norway, and the UK. It's been identified in at least 36 US states. Next slide. You can go past that. So I would like you to take over, Dr. Despani, and speak a few minutes, and then we'll speak to you and around some of the things we want our communities to know.
So basically, what's so critical about this Omicron variant and why it came like a bolt from the blue, even though we thought that we were 2 years into the pandemic and rounding a corner, is the fact that there are a myriad of different mutations, and we don't actually know where Omicron came from, but there are three hypotheses. One hypothesis is that because there weren't, enough immunized people, what happens is that for the people without immunization, the variant was able to evolve in them. Another theory is that it evolved in immunocompromised patient. And the reality is that that acts as an evolutionary training grounds for the virus to pick up like all these different point mutations. And I mean, it's compared to Delta, Omicron makes Delta look like a joke because it has 50 different point mutations. And the last theory is that what may have happened is that SARS coronavirus 2 may have spilled over into an animal reservoir, like a mouse or a rat or something. It may have picked up mutations, then it may have gotten and spilled back into humans, which is actually very common. That's how like HIV, for instance, became HIV from instead of being simian immunodeficiency virus. And we don't know. The reality though is that like we have no real way of being able to eradicate SARS coronavirus 2. So the reality is that we need to be mindful and really just focus on being together, right? Because right now we're fighting against this idea of cultural libertarianism, where it's like, I'll do whatever I want and damn everybody else. When the reality is that in order to defeat a pandemic, everybody has to put collective efforts, no differently than what we had to do when we came together in the aftermath of September 11th or Pearl Harbor. So the reality is that the people tend to think that these respiratory viruses are a joke, and the reality is that that's not the case at all. In fact, 800,000 Americans have died already, and this is something that happens like fairly like every century, right? The last time was the 1918 Spanish influenza, and that killed 650,000 Americans. So you already have a virus here, SARS coronavirus 2, that has killed 800,000 Americans. And by March of 2022, it's projected to have killed 1 million Americans. So let's not sleep on this. This is like a real threat, and this is going to cost lives that don't have to be lost to the virus, right? You never know who died, who could have been a potential future Martin Luther King of the 21st century or a potential Albert Einstein of the 21st century. So it's very important that we all take this as seriously as possible and move forward with integrity, intensity, and intelligence.
There's 2 slides I want you to look at. To go to the next slide, I hope that's it. No, go to the next one. So one more. So the one that shows the doubling time of 2 to 3 days and how rapidly Omicron is growing. This is a graph. Go to the next slide. This is the one I wanted. 111 people attended a Christmas party on November 26th at a restaurant in Oslo, and they celebrate Christmas early. Most were between the ages of 30 and 50 years old and had been vaccinated. 80 people, or 70%, were subsequently diagnosed with SARS-CoV-2, mostly Omicron variant. More than 60 people who visited the restaurant the same evening have been confirmed as infected. All infected at the party reported a negative test 1 to 3 days before the party. So this is highly transmitted. There were no hospitalizations, however, that occurred. Go to the next slide. No, go back. Okay, but the other story was of a group of people who were in a hotel. I believe it was London. All of them were in their separate rooms, and some 50% of those people in those rooms under isolation, a number of them got infected, and there was no documented connection between the people, but whether it was in the air ducts or what. My point is, and I want Dr. Despani and the others to discuss how transmissible this is and translate that into how we need to behave during this Christmas season. Dr. Despani first, and then other members of the panel can comment.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same, I guess, calculus that we have in place before, right? You need to be masked up. You need to practice pragmatic socially distancing, and get vaccinated, then that's not to say that you can't go visit family and what have you, but again, it's probably good to still wear an indoor mask unless it's a small gathering, because again, with a breakthrough infection, like they can still infect you even if you've been vaccinated before. That doesn't mean that you'll develop serious illness or end up in a hospital, but this is kind of get out of jail free card, right? You still have to be mindful and protect yourself, and you need to wash your hands and so forth and so on. So again, we all need to be in this together.
Yeah. So I wanted to speak a bit, Dr. Walks, about our recent meeting, and I thought that this particular conversation we were having was relevant because it was a group discussion. But we've had meetings amongst the co-moderators and technicians that we want to consider changing the format of the show to more of a podcast, more of a interactive discussion, and more up to date, including current events as we go forward. And I thought that we should at least announce that we're going to be meeting with our advisory group in 2 weeks. We're going to meet again amongst ourselves. But I wanted to open the floor now just to our listening audience of why we need to be up to date with what's going on in our healthcare. We know there's an election coming. We know that there are all sorts of things that are facing us that can affect our health, and we want to be more current with that. But I think it's especially important that we be able not to just give lectures like we're in medical school, which I think we've done a good job at it, but we want to be more interactive and, as the young people say, up to date, and change our format that'll be more interesting and more educational. I know Dr. Walks, you had some thoughts on that, and Simon too. Can you just speak on that a moment, and then we'll address the current topic?
Yeah, Dr. Maxey, I think that first of all, the fact that there are so many episodes of Black Health Trust that are archived that contain information from some of the top experts in several different aspects of healthcare, not only illness, but also, as we started in today's broadcast, talking about some reasons why folks aren't able to or aren't readily willing to go to the emergency room for financial reasons or others. So we have a tremendous amount of information that is currently relevant. And I think going back and looking at one of the programs where we talked a lot about COVID and how it spreads and how it impacts particularly communities of color is useful because there are differences. So what we talked about is looking at having a section of the program that would be a current events, current news kind of a section. If there's something going on in healthcare that is relevant to our audience, there's so many different places to get healthcare information, from all the different journals to all the different news reports to all the different medical societies, et cetera, et cetera. So having some vetted updates on events in healthcare that are impacting our community would be, I think, useful for us to spend time on a regular basis. The other thing is, even though we do have currently our program on the Zoom call as we're doing right now, along with it being broadcast and available via YouTube and being available for folks to go into the archives, going to a kind of a podcast format may make it even more available through some of the avenues that folks can receive podcasts. So we want to do two things. One is make sure that the information that we put out is current and useful, and then also make sure that folks can get to the information in a way that is That is current. A lot of you know, it used to be you'd watch TV back in the day. Dr. Maxey's probably too young to remember this, but back in the day you'd get new episodes for half the year, then you'd get reruns the other half of the year. And we only had about three channels. Now you can access information in many different ways, and folks are getting information very differently than they did by sitting down watching a television show. So that's sort of a summary of what I was thinking, Dr. Maxey.
Okay, I want to ask a very rare comment from our technical director, Mr. Cooper. Can you speak a moment on what you think about going forward, Mr. Cooper? If you're not bashful.
No, not at all. Just to echo what Dr. Walks is saying, to make it more accessible in more places aside from where we are. Switching to a podcast format is more laid back in a sense, like you were also saying, make it feel less educational, more engaging. And we just want to make sure at the end of the day, our main mission is to get the best information out to as many people as possible. And by changing that format, could go a long way to that means by being able to have it in multiple places that we aren't accessing already.
Okay, what I'll add to this, and I'm gonna take the liberty of opening up the mics in case we want to unmute some of our people who want to make comments going forward. We invited, but it is so very important that when you have something potentially wrong with you physically or mentally, that you don't just ignore it. Do not think it will just go away tomorrow because of time. Pay attention to the signs and symptoms. Your body is telling you something. If you're short of breath, it's not just because you're out of condition. There may be something you need to look at. If you're having black bowel movements, something is going on. If your hand is trembling or jumping, something needs to be looked at. It may be an early warning sign. If you're having difficulty urinating, that may be a sign that something needs to be looked at, and you want to have it looked at before it becomes irreversible. Those are my comments now. Are there any comments from anybody on the line? The mic is open. I see Dr. Lawson unmuted.
Well, I just want to note
Simon,
that,
can you unmute?
yeah, I'm unmuted now. I also want to note that I like the idea of a new format, but issue I'm running into consistently is, and I just did 5 different talks in 5 days to a number of community organizations. What was very clear is that when we deal with the issue of gang violence, community violence, is that when we talk about substance abuse, community violence, mental health, folks don't talk about everything else. And it's very clear that many of the folks have problems with diabetes, hypertension. You can just go down the list. And they unfortunately don't talk about them in the same breath. Political figures were there, and I'm sure that they only hear one aspect of it and don't hear it all. When in fact, we got to deal with all of these. I think one of the positives about this show is that as much as possible, tie in public health, mental health, and community action. And unfortunately, many of these kinds of concerns we have in terms of substance abuse and others have to do with personal responsibility and perhaps family responsibility and community responsibility. And you mentioned the point about doing something about this. Well, we have the other message. You must go out and get some pot. You must go out and get high. You must go out and take it easy, in terms of deal with your problems. And when you often just not given the message, I just had a long debate with someone who's saying, why are you worried about THC so much? What? So what? I said, what about lung cancer? What about it? What does that have to do with that? That folks are not, our community is not connecting the dots.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lawson. Anybody have a comment? Ms. Taylor? Mr. Brooks? I'm just looking at names I recognize, but the floor is open for a few moments. We're at the top of our hour.
Well, as
You
the
can-
saying, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
As the saying goes, Dr. Maxey, and good afternoon, everyone. Knowledge is power.
Well,
So
thank you
the
so much.
more we can continue to educate folks about their health and well-being, the better. And that includes incorporating other avenues of spreading that information with podcasts, et cetera. So that's my
Excellent.
comment.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And Dr. Johnson's unmuted.
Dr. Johnson?
It's good to see everyone.
Good to see you.
Yes, I think it's a great idea. I mean, when I logged on late, I'm so sorry. I've been involved heavily in other caregiving responsibilities, but when I logged on and saw that it was from 2021, I was like, is this right? Then I went on YouTube and I said, well, what I messaged Dr. Ivan. But I think it's a great idea. You know, we all have to stay relevant. If you're not relevant in life, you don't have a piece. You might as well just fold up the chair and, go sit somewhere else. So it's a chance. I don't watch many podcasts, even though I'm active on social media. But I think about what happened recently with this podcaster who I've never heard of until this week, a woman who does a podcast called Call Me Daddy. And she has like 10 million viewers for her podcast. And she had Vice President Harris on her podcast. And it's created, of course, an uproar with these MAGA followers and all of that. But podcasting is a big thing. And again, just because I don't really follow a lot of podcasts, but I did learn how to find hers and I watched her podcast. So it'll be different and might be some growing curves involved, but I think you have to always try to stay relevant. And I do think there's a lot of good information. Dr. Maxey, what you just said about not ignoring things, that is so important. And I said, is he talking to me? But anyway, I think there's a place for Black Health Trust, and I'm glad to see that you all are open to different avenues. I know even with my social media outreach, I had to change from my original focus, just talking about the pandemic. And I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I've achieved my purpose. But people keep asking me to talk about certain things. I just got another request today. Will you talk about X, Y, and Z? So there is a need. And, we are the experts. And the number, I see a lot of young Black doctors on social media. But if every single one of us had a social media presence, it still wouldn't be enough to meet the need out there. So I think whatever we can do to meet the needs are what we should be doing.
Well, thank you, Dr.
Well
Johnson.
said. Well said.
Any comments from Florida? Mr. Brooks? Mrs. Brooks? Is Vermont on?
I have a question. This is Hazel Tanner in Minnesota. I know nothing about podcasts. So when you guys make the switch, will you give us instructions on how to put a change?
Oh, yeah. We haven't figured it out yet. We're just putting the idea out there that we're working on and thinking about it. Black Health Trust will still be here, but we want to add additional things to make it more up to date, more upbeat. And I'm going to act like I'm 30 years old again.
Appreciate it.
But
Thank
we
you.
will let you know. We're still discussing, but we're looking for input.
And certainly we would not want to make a change without folks, especially folks who have been with us for years and are consistently part of our audience and part of our family, our Black Health Trust family who participate with us. We want to make sure that folks know how to continue to get the information and continue to share information and continue to be a part of this important work that we do. So this won't be like when the clock falls back in the fall and everybody comes to church at the wrong time. We're not going to just make it happen like that. We'll let folks know.
Okay. And also, we're going to want to make sure we've had some problem with people falling off of our invitation list. So, Simon, how can we reconstitute that? Can people communicate with us in the meantime to get back on the list? Mr. Cooper?
Yes, find us on Facebook and send your contact information via message on Facebook.
Okay, very good. Well, we're at the top of the hour.
Yep, we
Dr.
are.
Walks, I've enjoyed with you on and off today. My internet has not been working, but for the few minutes that I've been able to participate, I've enjoyed it. You have some final comments, Dr. Walks?
I do, Dr. Maxey. You can't act like you're 30 years old unless you have good social media and good internet connections, because all the young people have that stuff down. So you and I both have to step up our game if we're going to act like we're 30 again. And in addition to that, in all seriousness, I think that this is a very important conversation for us to have. I appreciate the comments about staying relevant, and I really do appreciate the comments. It's a real reality test to know that even if all of us African American physicians, all of those practitioners, all of us who are blessed with color, if we were all out there giving good health messages, it still, as Dr. Johnson said, wouldn't be enough. As Dr. Lawson agreed, it wouldn't be enough. So it's important that we keep doing what we're doing and that we find new ways to continue reaching folks. So I'm hoping that we will, I'm expecting we'll be able to get all of those details worked out and move forward.
Well, thank you, Dr. Walks. I wish everybody a great Sunday. Thank you for being with us. Continue to pray for those who were harmed by the two recent hurricanes and for those who have continued challenges with health. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you, Simon.
Good day, everyone.